You guys who love Shedeur and Carolina wearing his jerseys, you're making him into a celebrity. So if I'm a coach and I have to choose, okay, Joe Flacco's starting, Dillon Gabriel may be easier to deal with. You don't have to deal with the nonsense. So the truth is about these guys, I have two strong opinions. I think Dillon Gabriel's size is an issue. I would have a hard time building around him. He's small. I like his temperament more than Shedeur, who's silly and kind of goofy, but I think Shedeur was underdrafted. Shedeur is bigger. I think he moves well. I would choose Shedeur over Dillon Gabriel. I don't think either is transformational. And here's the thing. What NFL GMs really want from quarterbacks, they want you to be Andrew Luck. Great and boring. Brady was mostly boring when he played. Peyton Manning got really, really funny when he retired. If you're not great, and neither one of these quarterbacks is, you can't be the life of the party.
Colin Cowherd didn't just offer another hot take, he drew a clear line between potential and production, and in doing so, he put Dillon Gabriel in his place while going all in on Shedeur Sanders. Cowherd argued that Sanders isn't just another rookie quarterback, he's a ratings driver, a business asset, and a talent with a higher ceiling than many want to admit. By contrast, Gabriel was framed as steady but limited, someone who may not move the needle in the same way. That's why this debate has blown up. It's not only about football skills, it's about who can command the spotlight and carry a franchise's future. TV ratings spiked the moment Shedeur Sanders took the field in Colorado last season, with viewership climbing nearly 32% compared to the Buffalo's prior average broadcast slot. That's not a coincidence, and it's the kind of number Colin Cowherd immediately points to when he draws a line between Sanders and Dillon Gabriel. Sanders isn't just playing football, he's pulling national eyeballs, driving ticket sales, and influencing how networks schedule games. By comparison, Oklahoma games led by Gabriel drew respectable ratings regionally, but they never carried the same national pull, never produced the surge in primetime interest that Sanders has. When Cowherd defends Sanders, this is his baseline. One quarterback changes business outcomes, the other simply manages the offense. That distinction matters more than ever in today's NFL pipeline. The league is no longer evaluating quarterbacks solely on arm strength or completion percentage, although both still count heavily. Instead, they are graded on how they elevate franchises, fan bases, and yes, television contracts. Sanders is entering the league not only as a quarterback prospect, but as a pre-packaged star. Colorado sold out multiple games for the first time in decades once he was announced as the starter, and the secondary ticket market went from hovering barely above face value to reaching resale prices in the hundreds within days of kickoff. Gabriel, on the other hand, operated in a high-performing system at Oklahoma, but never produced the same ripple effects in revenue, and that's why Cowherd was quick to temper expectations for him. From a pure football perspective, the gap becomes even clearer when looking at performance trends. Sanders threw for over 3,200 yards, despite playing behind one of the most pressured offensive lines in college football, facing more sacks than almost any Power 5 quarterback. His completion percentage hovered around 70% through the first 3 weeks, before injuries and pressure brought him back toward the mid-60s. Gabriel, while efficient in stretches, often benefited from the Oklahoma system built around quick reads and stacked talent. His numbers were solid, over 3,600 passing yards and 30 touchdowns, but they didn't tell the story of a quarterback single-handedly carrying a program through adversity. That's the nuance Cowherd hits on. One player is tested under fire and still pulls fans to the television, the other thrives in structure but doesn't spark national debate. The conversation gets sharper when you tie these numbers to broader consequences. ESPN's midseason data showed that games involving Sanders ranked among the top 5 most streamed college football matchups of the year, even when Colorado lost. That's not just hype, it's measurable attention translating into ad revenue and leverage for both the NCAA and eventually the NFL. Contrast that with Oklahoma's bowl game led by Gabriel, which drew underwhelming ratings compared to its slot in prior years, dipping by nearly 1 million viewers year over year. Cowherd seizes on that gap because in today's media ecosystem, winning the press conference or driving the broadcast window often matters just as much as putting up a clean stat line. There's also a recruiting and development angle. Colorado merchandise sales tripled in the weeks following Sanders' debut, with Nike reporting spikes in jersey customization orders featuring his name. For Oklahoma, Gabriel jerseys were steady but never dominant, overshadowed by other Sooners stars. That contrast tells you where the star power lies eyes, and why Cowherd leans into defending Sanders. The quarterback is not just a piece of the puzzle, he's a multiplier effect for everything around him: fan engagement, school revenue, media coverage, and eventually NFL interest. Gabriel is respected, but he doesn't create the same multiplier. Cowherd also frames the debate around leadership and personality. Sanders has shown command in press conferences, displaying poise that mirrors his father's confidence, but is tailored to today's media-driven sports culture. That presence matters because sponsors and networks are looking for quarterbacks who can hold a mic as effectively as they run a 2-minute drill. Gabriel is quieter, more reserved, and while that can work in the right locker room, it doesn't elevate his profile in Cowherd's eyes. When networks negotiate contracts worth billions, they want personality who can cut through the noise. Sanders does that naturally. From a betting and business standpoint, the difference is just as clear. Sportsbooks tracked a 48% increase in handle on Colorado games once Sanders was confirmed healthy for a start, a measurable sign that fans wanted to put money behind games he was involved in. Oklahoma games under Gabriel saw strong action, but not nearly at the same national volume. To a commentator like Cowherd, who sees the NFL as an entertainment industry first and a competitive league second, those numbers tell you where the real momentum is headed. Sanders already has the profile of a quarterback networks will market heavily on Sundays. Gabriel feels more like a plug-and-play option, a solid piece rather than a franchise-altering figure. The broader implication Cowherd is defending is that Sanders is not just hype, he's measurable value. The debate isn't about whether Gabriel can play, it's about whether he can change the trajectory of a franchise. Sanders has already done that at Colorado, transforming a program that was irrelevant into one of the most talked about teams in the nation. That transformation came with sellout crowds, a secondary market frenzy, and rating spikes that ESPN openly bragged about. Gabriel has played winning football, but he has not shifted the landscape in the same way. When Cowherd puts him in his place, it's not an insult to his ability, it's a recognition that quarterbacks are now graded on a much bigger scale. Even within NFL circles, early chatter reflects that split. Scouts have noted that Sanders projects as a long-term starter with upside, someone who can attract both fan bases and marketing dollars. Gabriel, despite solid mechanics, has often been described as a backup caliber player unless placed in the perfect system. That framing aligns perfectly with Cowherd's argument. One quarterback is entering the NFL as a storyline the league can't afford to ignore, while the other may slip into obscurity without significant overperformance. It's a harsh but realistic contrast, and Cowherd's defense of Sanders is rooted in those measurable differences. Losing preseason reps is never ideal, but when those reps belong to a quarterback with the spotlight of Shedeur Sanders, the consequences ripple far beyond the practice field. Every snap he takes, every drive he leads becomes data not just for coaches breaking down film, but for networks deciding which matchups deserve national windows. In Denver, where Sanders' name has become shorthand for hope and renewal, those lost reps mean Kevin Stefanski and the Browns staff have less film to measure against their own quarterback plans, and it means the fan base has to wait longer for proof of what the hype has promised. Dillon Gabriel, meanwhile, doesn't generate the same ripple effect when his practice reps shift. His evaluation is important to coaches and teammates, but it doesn't alter ticket prices, sportsbook numbers, or primetime scheduling the way Sanders already does. That's the reason Colin Cowherd emphasized Sanders' importance in the immediate sense. For a player like Sanders, every day on the field is a moment of leverage. His college career showed that when he's active, viewership climbs. Colorado's first 3 games of the season drew national attention at a level not seen in Boulder in decades, with ratings that outpaced traditional powerhouses. The Buffalo's Week 1 matchup pulled over 7.2 million viewers, nearly doubling the prior year's opener for the same slot. When Sanders wasn't healthy later in the year, that number dropped by millions. In other words, networks are already conditioned to tie his presence to ratings performance. Compare that with Gabriel's late season performances for Oklahoma. Solid quarterback play, good stat lines, but ratings that hovered right around the Big 12's usual baseline. It's a difference Cowherd sees as defining in the right now conversation. Fans are noticing too, and that's where the economics of the moment become unavoidable. Denver's ticket resale market has reflected a nearly 40% premium once Sanders was linked with the franchise. Single game seats that previously hovered just above $100 were suddenly pushing toward $180 on average for home games, all before Sanders has even taken his first regular season snap. Oklahoma didn't see the same spikes around Gabriel. Their attendance was strong, averaging over 83,000 per home game, but that's baked into to the program's long-standing dominance. The difference is one of baseline versus added value. Sanders lifts a program above expectations, while Gabriel keeps a strong machine running at its usual pace. That's a crucial distinction Cowherd makes clear, because the NFL leans toward quarterbacks who can rewrite business models, not just maintain them. Coaches feel the weight of this too. Stefanski and his staff have to evaluate how much to expose Sanders in preseason versus protecting him for the long haul, and every decision is amplified by media coverage. A missed week of practice for Sanders gets dissected on ESPN panels, debated in Cowherd's monologues, and even shifts betting lines for preseason games. Gabriel doesn't face the same scrutiny. His missed reps are noted in Oklahoma coverage, but rarely become national headlines. That uneven spotlight is exactly why Cowherd leans toward defending Sanders. It's not just hype, it's reality. The scale of attention is larger, and that means every decision carries more weight for the team, the league, and even the networks writing broadcast schedules. The sponsorship market underlines the urgency of Sanders' situation. Nike and Fanatics have already positioned Sanders as one of the key rookie names to push once he enters the NFL, with early jersey pre-orders already testing high in Colorado markets. When Sanders missed late season snaps, merchandise sales dipped, showing a direct link between his presence and retail demand. Gabriel has NIL deals too, but none operate at the same national level. His partnerships were valuable regionally, but they don't shift national headlines when he signs a new agreement. That gap in commercial gravity is part of why Cowherd frames the conversation so sharply. For Sanders, the stakes of the present are higher because the league and its partners have already invested in him as a star. From a football-only angle, the immediacy of Sanders' reps matters even more. Denver's offensive line is in the middle of a rebuild, and Sanders has to prove he can adapt quickly, manage pressure, and deliver against NFL-level defenses. Every practice rep lost is one less chance for Stefanski to evaluate his chemistry with the first-team receivers. Last season, Sanders was sacked over 50 times at Colorado, one of the highest totals in college football. That stat lingers in scouting reports, and the only way to combat it is live reps that show he can process faster in pro systems. Gabriel, by contrast, thrived in an offense designed to minimize pressure. Quick throws, clean pockets, spread formations. His evaluation is different, but it also means he hasn't faced the same level of adversity Sanders has. That distinction is why Cowherd views Sanders' development path as more significant in the immediate frame. The media climate magnifies this urgency. Colorado's games became social events last fall, with celebrities on the sidelines, former NFL stars in attendance, and networks treating Sanders like a headline property. That same energy is now following him to Denver. When practice reports note that Sanders connected on a 40-yard touchdown in drills, it becomes a trending story across platforms. Gabriel doesn't command the same click volume or trending tag frequency, and Cowherd knows that matters when the league is trying to capture younger audiences through social engagement. Immediate attention translates into long-term leverage for television rights, sponsorship deals, and even league branding campaigns. Sportsbooks offer another lens on why the present is more consequential for Sanders. When he was ruled out for late-season Colorado games, betting handle on those matchups fell by nearly 50% week over week. That's a sharp, measurable decline, showing that fans and bettors tied their interest directly to his presence. In Denver, preseason game betting has already shown elevated activity compared to the prior year, with Sanders' involvement driving futures bets on the team's playoff odds. Gabriel has never shifted betting lines in the same way. His games see action, but not at the scale that moves markets. This is a tangible reason Cowherd defends Sanders. The stakes of every snap are financially heavier, and the consequences ripple through multiple layers of the sports economy. Even in the locker room, why it matters now is tied to leadership. Veterans in Denver have spoken about Sanders' presence as energizing, noting how quickly he's embraced film study and command of the huddle. That kind of respect, earned before his first regular season start, sets the tone for the season. Gabriel has his leadership qualities too, but again, the scale is different. At Oklahoma, he was a steady leader in a winning culture, but he didn't redefine the environment. Sanders, on the other hand, has shifted atmospheres twice already, once in Boulder and now in Denver. That's why Cowherd sees the stakes as higher today. Sanders is on a trajectory where every step is magnified, every choice is weighted, and every result matters beyond just the box score. Ultimately, why it matters now boils down to leverage. Sanders is already leveraged as a business driver, a ratings pull, and a future star. Gabriel is respected as a capable quarterback, but doesn't carry the same leverage across the broader football economy. That's why Cowherd planted his defense of Sanders firmly in the present. It's not a question of waiting 3 years to see who develops. It's about recognizing who changes the math today. Sanders does, and that's the kind of edge Cowherd never overlooks. Unlike Patrick Mahomes in his rookie season, Shedeur Sanders doesn't have the luxury of learning quietly behind a veteran while the spotlight looks elsewhere. Mahomes sat for nearly his entire first year in Kansas City, and the Chiefs still sold tickets, drew ratings, and moved merchandise without him. Sanders, by contrast, is the story before his first NFL completion. Denver's preseason tickets surged by more than 4,500 seats once he was announced as a projected starter, a number that would have been unthinkable for a mid-August game 5 years ago. That's where the contrast begins. Sanders carries a level of immediate commercial weight that quarterbacks like Dillon Gabriel simply don't. Gabriel's arrival doesn't shift market behavior. It blends into the baseline of what Oklahoma or any NFL franchise already expects. Cowherd's defense of Sanders makes even more sense when you measure him against the last decade of college to pro transitions. Take Johnny Manziel. He had hype, but his actual on-field performance never matched the energy. Yet even then, Cleveland's preseason ratings jumped nearly 25% during his rookie year, simply because fans wanted to see the experiment. Sanders isn't being compared to Manziel in terms of behavior, but in terms of raw market pull, the parallel is striking. Colorado's opener last season outrated Ohio State's by over 2 million viewers, a statistic almost impossible to imagine without Sanders under center. Gabriel, by contrast, never produced that kind of comparative spike. His bowl game appearances saw ratings remain flat or even dip compared to the previous season's slot. The comparison makes clear why Cowherd draws a hard line. One player consistently elevates his environment while the other sustains it. Statistically, the quarterbacks also diverge in meaningful ways. Sanders was pressured on nearly 40% of his dropbacks last season, one of the highest marks among Power 5 quarterbacks, and still maintained a passer rating north of 130. That resilience under fire becomes part of the narrative Cowherd latches onto. Sanders isn't just compiling numbers, he's doing it under conditions that mirror what he'll face in the NFL. Gabriel, on the other hand, thrived in clean pocket situations, with 70% of his touchdowns coming on plays with fewer than 2 seconds of pressure. It's not that Gabriel can't perform, it's that his success has been system protected, while Sanders has been system defying. Historically, quarterbacks who thrive under duress, think Josh Allen at Wyoming or Joe Burrow in his senior season at LSU, tend to make smoother NFL transitions. That's another comparison that tilts heavily in Sanders' favor. The ratings data supports the same conclusion. When Trevor Lawrence entered Clemson's starting lineup, viewership for the Tigers rose by nearly 20% year over year, a sign that star quarterbacks elevate entire brands. Sanders has already matched that kind of lift, but at a school with a far smaller built-in audience. Colorado's average game viewership went from under 1 million per contest in 2022 to well over 3 million in 2023 with Sanders. That tripling effect is precisely the kind of metric that excites broadcasters and justifies Cowherd's defense. Gabriel, by comparison, played for a blue blood program where ratings were already strong. Oklahoma's viewership didn't meaningfully spike because of him, which makes it harder to argue that he is a needle mover in the same way. It's a comparison that underlines Cowherd's broader point. Sanders doesn't just play quarterback, he transforms ecosystems. Ticket sales data reinforces this divide. During Sanders' tenure at Colorado, every home game sold out for the first time in nearly 30 years. The resale market was so hot that average secondary ticket prices reached over $200 for marquee matchups, levels typically reserved for playoff games. Oklahoma, with Gabriel, continued to draw large crowds, but that was expected. Their stadium regularly sells out regardless of quarterback, meaning Gabriel didn't fundamentally change the financial picture. That contrast matters in the NFL context because franchises are increasingly sensitive to how much a quarterback drives incremental revenue. Sanders has already proven he can do it. Gabriel has not. Cowherd, who constantly frames sports through the business lens, views that as the essential separator. The gambling market provides another historical point of comparison. When Baker Mayfield entered the NFL, sportsbooks saw a dramatic increase in Browns-related bets, not because Cleveland was suddenly a juggernaut, but because Mayfield brought energy, attention, and belief belief. Sanders is already producing a similar effect. Futures bets on Denver to make the playoffs spiked 35% once Sanders was confirmed as the starter for preseason reps, despite the team having long odds. Gabriel has never shifted betting patterns in that way. His games at Oklahoma were bet heavily, but that's because of the program, not him individually. The distinction between player-driven action and program-driven action is central to Cowherd's point. Sanders pulls action himself, just like Burrow did at LSU or Mayfield at Oklahoma. Gabriel fits into a structure but doesn't lead betting behavior. Even the cultural footprint provides sharp contrast. When Sanders led Colorado to an upset win early in the season, social media engagement skyrocketed. ESPN reported that highlight packages featuring Sanders pulled nearly 50 million views across platforms within 48 hours. Gabriel's best games never touched those numbers. His highlights drew strong engagement in Oklahoma's fan base, but not on the national scale Sanders commands. Historically, quarterbacks who dominate the digital conversation, think Tim Tebow at Florida or Johnny Manziel at Texas A&M, carry disproportionate cultural influence. Sanders belongs in that lineage. Gabriel does not. Cowherd knows this, and that's why his argument frames Sanders as a unique asset while tempering expectations for Gabriel. On the football field, the comparison can also be made with resilience and adaptability. Sanders, despite constant sacks and a porous line, still maintained one of the highest adjusted completion percentages in the country. That mirrors quarterbacks like Russell Wilson at NC State and Wisconsin, who excelled under pressure and carried that skill into the pros. Gabriel's efficiency and clean systems is reminiscent of quarterbacks like Colt McCoy or Sam Bradford, players who were highly effective in college but less dynamic when facing NFL-level defenses. Cowherd's contrast isn't about disrespecting Gabriel's ability, it's about recognizing which quarterback has shown traits that scale upward. Sanders' skill set under adversity already looks NFL ready. Gabriel's may require more favorable circumstances to succeed. The sponsorship and merchandise parallels are just as telling. When Joe Burrow won the Heisman, LSU merchandise sales skyrocketed nationwide, making him a brand before he even took his first NFL snap. Sanders has sparked a similar trend at Colorado, with his jersey ranking among the top sellers in the NCAA last season. Gabriel, while respected, never cracked those charts nationally. His impact was strong locally but didn't register at scale. That's why Cowherd's defense of Sanders feels so pointed. He understands that in today's sports economy, quarterbacks are brands, and Sanders is already one of the strongest entering the league. Ultimately, the compare and contrast lens exposes the same truth from every angle. Sanders produces measurable surges in ratings, attendance, merchandise, betting, and cultural relevance. Gabriel produces solid, steady numbers but not transformative ones. Historically, quarterbacks who deliver transformation, Burrow, Lawrence, Allen, get treated differently from those who deliver consistency without fireworks. Cowherd is simply applying that lens in real time, and it explains why his commentary framed Sanders as the quarterback with the higher ceiling while putting Gabriel firmly in context. It's not a slight, it's a recognition of scale, and scale is the metric that matters most right now. When Colin Cowherd defends Shedeur Sanders, he isn't just talking about a quarterback's arm strength or footwork, he's talking about a business model. Few players in recent memory have carried the kind of economic impact Sanders already has, and the data proves it. Last season, when Colorado squared off against Colorado State, the game drew 9.3 million viewers, the highest late-night audience in ESPN's history. At its peak, 11.1 million people were watching a matchup that, in any other year, would have barely registered on the national radar. That audience number didn't come from the opponent or even from Colorado's overall record. It came from Shedeur Sanders. He was the storyline, the ratings magnet, and the reason casual fans who hadn't watched Pac-12 football in years stayed glued to their screens. That's the kind of economic footprint that fuels Cowherd's argument. The stadium numbers tell the same story. For the first time since 1996, Colorado sold out its entire home slate. Season tickets vanished months before kickoff, and resale prices skyrocketed. Average resale seats for marquee matchups hovered around $200, which is more in line with an NFL playoff ticket than a college regular season game. None of this happened before Sanders arrived. For nearly 3 decades, Colorado football was an afterthought. One season of Sanders under center completely rewrote the revenue stream. Compare that to Dillon Gabriel's time at Oklahoma. The Sooners already sell out almost every home game. They averaged over 83,000 fans per contest in 2023. Gabriel kept the train on schedule, but he didn't change the economics. Sanders, on the other hand, elevated a dormant program into one of the hottest tickets in the country. That's the contrast Cowherd is zeroing in on. One quarterback adds millions in new value, the other sustains existing value. Merchandise provides another angle. Fanatics reported that Colorado gear sales spiked by more than 1,200% year over year after Deion Sanders and Shedeur entered the program. Jerseys with Shedeur's name were among the most ordered across college football. Gabriel, though popular in Norman, never moved national merchandise charts. His jerseys sold regionally, as expected for a starting Oklahoma quarterback, but they didn't create new national demand. That difference matters because it shows how brands and fans behave. Shedeur Sanders is already functioning like a professional star. Fans across the country are buying his gear, not just people in Boulder. Gabriel hasn't had that reach. Sponsorships underline the point. Shedeur has partnered with companies like Beats by Dre, Gatorade, and Tom Brady's Brady brand, all of which use him in national campaigns. That's rare air for a college player, and it positions him as a ready-made marketing face for the NFL. Gabriel has had NIL deals as well, but they were largely regional and tied to Oklahoma's built-in popularity. He didn't secure the type of national campaigns that make advertisers salivate. This is where Cowherd's business-minded approach comes into play. When he defends Sanders, he isn't just hyping a quarterback, he's pointing out that corporations already treat Sanders as an NFL-level asset. The gambling market offers proof of how far that reach goes. Colorado games with Sanders under center routinely saw betting handles rival NFL matchups. In fact, the Colorado State game reportedly took nearly as much action in Las Vegas as a typical NFL Sunday night contest. When Sanders was ruled out later in the year, betting volume on Colorado games fell by nearly half. That's a direct, measurable impact of his presence. Gabriel's games were heavily bet too, especially Oklahoma versus Texas, which drew over 8 million viewers. But those numbers were tied to the rivalry and the program's national footprint, not to Gabriel himself. This is the distinction Cowherd emphasizes. Sanders moves betting markets as an individual, Gabriel does not. Then there's fan sentiment and cultural presence. When Sanders leads a comeback drive or delivers in the clutch, his highlights dominate social media feeds. Clips rack up tens of millions of views in days, crossing over into mainstream conversation. Gabriel has had strong moments, but they don't trend nationally in the same way. His highlights stay largely within the Oklahoma bubble, respected but not culture shifting. Cowherd often points out that modern quarterbacks need to be more than just players. They have to be media entities. Sanders already is one, Gabriel isn't, and likely never will be on that level. This deeper context reveals why Cowherd draws such a sharp line. Sanders has already proven himself as a ratings driver, a ticket seller, a merchandise leader, and a sponsorship magnet. He transforms environments. Gabriel plays well and wins games, but he doesn't alter the financial picture. The NFL is paying attention to that. Teams don't just draft quarterbacks for wins, they draft them for what they represent to the franchise. Sanders brings a ready-made national following, proven engagement, and the ability to move millions of dollars. Gabriel brings steadiness and skill, but doesn't carry that same economic gravity, and that's why Cowherd's defense isn't really about disrespecting Gabriel. It's about recognizing scale. In today's NFL ecosystem, quarterbacks are judged not just by completion percentage, but by how much they elevate the business of football. Sanders has already demonstrated that he does so at historic levels. Gabriel hasn't. For Cowherd, that makes the choice clear, and the defense of Sanders isn't just about talent, it's about economics, attention, and the future of the league's entertainment machine. The future of both quarterbacks is where Colin Cowherd's defense of Shedeur Sanders takes on its sharpest edge. For Sanders, the question isn't whether he'll get opportunities, but how quickly he'll become the face of a franchise. For Dillon Gabriel, the question is almost the opposite. How long can he hold on to opportunities, and can he outperform expectations enough to avoid being labeled as a temporary solution? The stakes are uneven, and that's precisely why Cowherd frames the debate the way he does. Sanders is walking into an NFL landscape that is starved for quarterbacks who can drive business beyond the box score. The league has its established faces, Patrick Mahomes, Josh Allen, Joe Burrow, but each generation requires new stars who bring both skill and market pull. Sanders checks every box the league covets. He's already demonstrated that he can boost ratings by millions. He has merchandise sales that rival established pros. His name is recognized outside of hardcore football circles, which means sponsors and networks can comfortably put him at the center of campaigns. If he delivers even modestly on the field, the NFL will market him aggressively because the infrastructure is already in place. That's not a projection, it's inevitable. The implications for Denver are enormous. If Sanders thrives, he instantly transforms the Broncos' trajectory. This is a team that hasn't been a consistent national ratings draw since Peyton Manning retired. Local attendance has been steady, but national attention has been minimal. With Sanders, the potential shifts overnight. Television contracts are negotiated years in advance, but networks will fight for Denver's games if Sanders becomes a consistent starter. A single player can rewrite a franchise's media calendar, and Sanders is positioned to be that player. Ticket resale prices in Denver have already jumped more than 40% once his name was attached to the depth chart. If he wins early, those numbers will only rise. That is the kind of leverage that dictates how franchises spend in free agency, how quickly they build around him, and how aggressively they market his image across the region. Contrast that with Gabriel's likely path. Oklahoma quarterbacks have historically drawn NFL interest, but Gabriel's scouting reports consistently project him as a mid-round pick or backup caliber player. His size, arm strength, and system-based production raise questions about whether he can carry an offense in the NFL. That doesn't mean he won't play. It means he'll need to overperform to hold on to a starting role. In today's NFL, backups are valuable, but they don't reshape franchises. That's the harsh reality, Cowherd points out. Unless Gabriel significantly exceeds expectations, he's more likely to become a stopgap than a cornerstone. His future could resemble players like Case Keenum or Taylor Heineke, respected, productive in stretches, but never marketed as the face of a franchise. The business implications extend far beyond Denver or Oklahoma. If Sanders becomes even a top 15 quarterback in the league, he changes how the NFL negotiates its television windows. Imagine a Denver versus Kansas City matchup suddenly pulling 20 million viewers, not only because of Mahomes, but because Sanders is on the other sideline. That's the kind of dynamic the league craves. New rivalries, fresh narratives, and broader audience capture. The NFL has already seen the value of this formula with Burrow versus Mahomes or Allen versus Mahomes. Sanders versus any established star could become a broadcast anchor. Gabriel doesn't project into those conversations. Even if he earns starts, he's unlikely to draw national slots unless his team is already elite. Sponsorship trajectories also paint the future clearly. Sanders will likely sign one of the most lucrative rookie endorsement packages in NFL history. Gatorade, Beats, and Nike have already validated him as a national brand. If he's competent as a rookie, that number will only grow. Gabriel's endorsements, by comparison, will likely remain modest and regionally focused. That's not a knock on him, it's just a reflection of marketability. The NFL has always marketed its quarterbacks as faces of the league, and Sanders is tailor-made for that role. Gabriel fits more into the journeyman lane, where performance matters but branding opportunities are scarce. For sportsbooks, Sanders' trajectory could reshape betting behavior. Futures bets on Denver have already surged since he was projected as a starter. If he delivers, the Broncos will suddenly attract national betting volume, similar to what happened with Joe Burrow in Cincinnati. Gabriel's NFL presence, while valuable, will not create that same effect unless he significantly outperforms expectations. That difference matters because it influences how sportsbooks market games and how much money flows through specific matchups. Playoff implications hinge on these dynamics too. Denver, with Sanders, has a chance to accelerate a rebuild. A competent Sanders means they can attract free agents who want to play alongside him, boost ticket revenue to reinvest in roster building, and gain national attention that pressures ownership to spend aggressively. If Gabriel is in a starting role, his team will need to already have a strong infrastructure to succeed. He isn't the kind of quarterback who single-handedly tilts playoff odds. Sanders, if he adapts quickly, absolutely could. From the league's perspective, the future is about more than wins and losses. It's about the next generation of stars who can sustain massive media deals. Shedeur Sanders is already carrying the kind of metrics that excite executives. His games draw record-setting college football viewership. His merchandise sells like an NFL starter's. His social media presence reaches millions instantly. If the NFL can pair that with on-field success, he becomes one of the league's central marketing figures. Gabriel's ceiling is more modest. He can be a capable quarterback, maybe even a playoff starter in the right system, but he doesn't project as a league-wide brand. This is why Cowherd's defense has long-term weight. He isn't just saying Sanders is better right now. He's saying the league needs Sanders to succeed, not because Gabriel lacks talent, but because Sanders offers something bigger. The NFL is an entertainment product, and entertainment thrives on stars. Sanders is a star before taking a snap. Gabriel is a player who will need years of overperformance to be considered one. The future, as Cowherd sees it, is already leaning heavily in Sanders' direction. Colin Cowherd's defense of Shedeur Sanders wasn't just about a quarterback comparison, it was about what football has become. In today's game, the players who matter most aren't only the ones who can throw 40-yard strikes or execute third-down conversions. They're the ones who can move markets, fill stadiums, and make television executives redraw their programming schedules. Sanders already does all of that. He has proven he can triple viewership, sell out every seat in the house, and drive national conversation week after week. Dillon Gabriel is a good quarterback, but he represents steadiness, not transformation. That difference is why Cowherd was so blunt. The takeaway is simple. The NFL doesn't just need quarterbacks, it needs stars who can sustain its billion-dollar business model. Sanders arrives with the profile of a star. Gabriel arrives with the resume of a capable starter. That gap will shape not just their careers, but also the way teams, sponsors, and fans respond in the years to come. For Cowherd, the defense of Sanders is a recognition that football's future depends on players who bring both production and spectacle, both leadership and leverage. So the debate now turns to you. Does the NFL need Shedeur Sanders to succeed more than it needs Dillon Gabriel to prove himself? And just as importantly, are we valuing hype and business impact over pure production? Or is that simply the reality of the modern game?